OMORI is a game that really doesn't need much introduction. A real shocker to everyone who's clicked on this video, I presume. I suppose it is an actual shocker is the fact me of all people are covering it and serving it more in line with my usual stuff. It also doesn't help that this game is somewhat old news now, being out for 1.5 years after all. I'll cover this more in depth later, though in reality I've been meaning to try OMORI for a heck of a long time. It then showed up on Xbox Game Pass, which is the version I played, and I decided to give it a shot. I should put it off for a while. It's a game I've heard a lot of things about, and to an extent, based on what I've heard, I wanted to dedicate time to, so I can have time to think through things and such. It's one of those things where I kind of felt like I had to make a video of my experience after playing, so I just did. As a result, most things said here are from a single playthrough. I'm talking about a game, not reviewing it. This is also not like a theory, not covering themes deeply. It's more like a general discussion around the game and just the experience of playing it. Don't expect anything like too serious. I am literally just speaking to a microphone for a heck of a long time about this weird game I played once and I think is kinda neat. So, yeah, have fun with the video. It's a game that, from my perspective at least, seems to be dominated by discussions, similar to games like Undertale, in the general idea that a lot of what I see of the game is more about people who play it, and that rather than the game itself. Like, I go onto videos and I see people tend to simply say, no, I don't want to play OMORI, in comments of playing other RPGs and such. I've seen a lot of elements of this game being talked about. I mean, I can look at OMORI, and I see more or less exactly what you'd expect me to see. A lot of theories, plot summaries, odd secrets, analysis, etc, etc. These create a heavy emphasis on community, I imagine. This actually kinda sucks, honestly. I think a big part of OMORI as a game is that it's very emotional. And personal. Here's the thing. OMORI is an awful game to watch, and hear what people talk about, especially in relation to the actual thing. Despite its moments, I do think watching this game is best when you played it before. In actuality, this is the main message of the video. You probably shouldn't watch people play OMORI, or theories around it. You should probably just play the game. That's not because it's a masterpiece or anything, I actually think it has some very severe issues, but because this game is incredibly emotional, and you will not get that much out of it by watching with people. In fact, I'm doubtful if you get all too much by recording and streaming it. To me at least, it seems like way too much of that. But I'm honestly sure I could be totally wrong there. If you need an access point, go for the Xbox Game Pass. It has a PC version if you didn't catch that, or just buy it on Steam or some other console. The console version / Game Pass version does seem to have some additional content changes, so I guess I'll specifically suggest that, but it honestly shouldn't matter much. I'd recommend looking at the Steam page, going through what's there, then deciding from that whether you really want to play it. See, this game works best when going fully blind, and if you're watching this now, you can probably get it. Regardless, I'll still hold back major spoilers and story events for later in this general discussion about and around the game. And even then, I will be excluding some information. I'll instead focus on very simple aspects of the game you likely already can know about, and more mechanical stuff, you know, the combat, exploration, and the mechanics themselves. This is probably going to result in a lot of weirdness, but whatever. Some people want to hear a bit more, and it's to me to deliver. Also, just in general, making a video that surmises to, guys, just play the game, is a terrible idea, and I kind of want to make a video longer than 10 seconds. Okay? Okay. Firstly, I'm going to cover the Steam page. I'm going to look at 3 very important things. 1, it was released in Christmas, and that's just kind of cute. Like, this game was anticipated for a while before release, and I love the fact it was a Christmas present. Actually, in hindsight, that's really terrifying. Whatever. The second most important thing here is the tags. The most popular is psychological horror. And I'm going to skip the tags here, actually. I think this is an error. OMORI is a weird game, and yes, among that weird is elements of psychological horror. But that's about it for me. The game isn't a psychological horror, it's honestly more of a standard RPG with comedic elements to me in the vast, just expanse of the game. It's only like really short bursts of true terror, and a general feeling of dread that does seem to build throughout the game. But, it's weird. I just don't think putting psychological horror above, like, RPG is accurate. It's more of an RPG than a psychological horror game. Like, that's not disputable. I think you've played the game, you might have a general sense of what I mean. Again, do play before continuing, please. Though the third important thing might be the reason why you wouldn't. The disclaimer. This game touches on the tried and true classics of good old indie RPG game design, depression, anxiety, suicide, you know, all great and truly wonderful things that are family friendly for all ages. Joking aside, this is a very prominent theme in OMORI, and it's basically a thing which people think when they hear OMORI. And considering it's essentially the backbone for everything, I think it's safe to say if you don't feel comfortable enough to see a lot of, well, terrible things to happen, this game is probably not for you. That's totally fine. Not every piece of media is for everybody. Frankly, it seems to have been more of this stuff now than it used to be. And modern gaming has been really negative for a very long time now. A lot more criticism of modern life than it seems they used to. Or at least in most circles that seems to be the case. I want to use this to discuss something that originally I put a lot later, but I think saying it now just helps the game as a whole. And that's essentially the fact this is an indie RPG mega game. In other words, it's definitely less unique as a game like this would be years and years ago. It's been a common trend recently for games to have emotional beats. Even platforms like Celeste carry emotional messages about mental health. This isn't a bad thing, but something I swear I've seen people talk about often, as in its commonicity and overuse. Or at the very least I think about it a lot. It's common theming. I don't think it needs to explain why, but it also just leads to a lot of people mentioning OMORI similarities to a lot of games, from what I've heard. I'm kind of conflicted how I feel about this. On one hand, I feel that the story in general is a story told time and time again. People have seen emotional mental health being mentioned and are super important, but it also weakens the message just because of how much these elements are mentioned and used. These days, anti-core messaging is everywhere. To point that theming a game around it is ultimately super bland. It's common knowledge on the horrors of corporations and such, so this doesn't feel nearly as impactful as it did before it was commonly accepted. And I feel these kind of emotional messages are falling into similarity. On the other hand, there's different ways to tell a story, and these themes tend to be repeated because there is truth to those tales. You can tell a message in a lot of ways, and I think OMORI does tell in a way that state of people. At least for me, the emotional beats still work because of the way the story presents itself, though I cannot call them most unique I've ever seen in the game. I've also seen the classic quirky Earthbound-inspired RPG moniker slapped in this game. Honestly, I can't really dispute it. It's very similar to other games that have similar tags applied. I think it mostly comes down to its comedy though, and that absolutely applied here. This game's comedy is not something I'm a massive fan of, though more so the intensity and frequency of it. It also goes against the whole theming to me, and is an actual problem I have with the game. Like, complaining about originality is hardly an actual flaw. A game can be done well with an altered theme. You know, I think the comedy is something that I am not a big fan of, due to how out of place it can be sometimes. 99% of the game takes place in this large area, which is essentially a dream called Headspace that OMORI has. And, as we discussed, he's a main character in a game with a disclaimer about mental health. I do not need to say more. A slight problem, this part of the game feels way too lighthearted to come out of its kid's brain. Like, there's an entire race of mole sprouts who are obsessed with tofu, and are essentially idiots and a concept of comic relief in like every part of the game, and there's an entire part of the game essentially dedicated to them. The recurring enemies are bunnies that just morph into increasingly grotesque and weird forms to become part of the world. I'm aware that people with depression and similar mental issues can have different thoughts than just pure sad, but it's a constant theme throughout the game where the game just becomes weird in this kind of jokey way. This is probably my concern with the game as a whole. I'm not asking for a game that doesn't make jokes or anything. I think comedy and more serious problems are a winning damn formula. I think OMORI as a game does actually work nicely, when you don't think about it as I have. But it's just incredibly weird and somewhat dominating. That's not to say I don't know why it does this. I think there's a clear reason, and I think this comedic side is a big part of what made OMORI so big. Frankly, this game is a hard pill to swallow, but is a tad bit heavily done in some places. Especially while rewatching footage, the amount of whiplash I get from jumping different parts is too much. You might get what I mean, but if you played the game, consider the fact that this game's ending sequence happens in the same game as some of the other crap this game has. Like, it sometimes even feels like this stuff is way too damn close and not eased in properly, which results in a constant feeling of whiplash, at least for me. Also yes, I'm starting this discussion off by pointing out my main issue with the game as a whole. Talking about issues is always an important thing to do, and I think there's something to keep in mind. That's why this is first? Well, because I don't really have all too much else to talk about in terms of strict issues. Even this is forgettable when the game gets more intense. It's really more so the slap back into reality that it's me. I suppose it could be the point, but it downplays some major moments to me, so I'll bring it up regardless. Either way, the group of you, OMORI, Kel, Aubrey, and Hero are on a quest to find their friend Basil, who has mysteriously disappeared. It's a fairly simple plot, and that doesn't do a whole lot on its own, rather than just allow players to explore the world laid in front of them. I realize I actually never said this, so like, yeah, it happens. Joking aside, this is the main stuff behind the headspace sequences. The goal isn't the most relevant thing ever, it just leads you into trouble and gives you a reason to get past it. It looks enough, and these guys plus Mario for Picnic Basket get into wacky hijinks to continue forward to find their lost friend. It's also forms a lot of comedy, which is generally entertaining as much as I've put down before. It's a classic nonsense humor that these kind of games tend to get. As per usual, it's generally fairly entertaining when you can enjoy it. But this stuff isn't really the highlight in these parts. In reality, the main focus, at least for me, was the actual combat in these parts, which is a rarity. OMORI is a turn-based RPG. You have our party members. You, Kel, Hero, and Aubrey. You select the act at the start, and your speed determines the order your group and enemies attack. It's a simple concept, basically Pokemon in a sense, with some separate charm and just general strangeness. Like, to briefly go over how weird this is, when people die, they become toast. Literally. You're reviving with jam. You don't have mana, you have juice for some reason. You don't collect money, you collect clams. The greatest currency of all time. It's just a game in general, super weird, you just kinda get used to it eventually. But it has a really nice mechanic I really like, emotions. Emotions in general are a similar concept. They each buff a stat, and increase a stat significantly, and can be changed through specific moves and attacks. These can also be increased to an extreme, so happy can become ecstatic, then manic. There are three main emotions, angry, happy, and sad. Angry makes you stronger, but takes more damage every time you hit. Happy increases your speed and gives more crits, but allows your attacks to miss more. Sad increases your defense, and when you are hit, your juice will decrease instead of HP from a lot of attacks, but also will decrease your speed significantly. What makes this work so well is that this is an effect you can apply on both enemies and friends, which incorporates a lot of strategy in when and where you use it. For instance, you can make a foe angry to make you able to kill it quicker, but while angry, it's probably going to one-shot a lot of things, and his damage up has increased a lot, and so you need to be able to rush it down when you do so. Or you can even make an ally angry. The reduced defense is unlikely to really be affected if they simply don't get hit, so you can actually just set it up so that they're not going to be hit very much. You can even make a fast enemy sad if you want, so you can act forward and neutral it with being more reactable. I personally found my main use for was activating certain moves. For instance, making Aubrey mad further increases the power of a skill called Headbutt, which generally makes it a good call. Skills are essentially what they sound like, character-exclusive moves that use juice to activate. One of the big things this does is show off each character quite well. Aubrey is fairly stubborn, so they are the standard version of a tank, as in pretty good HP with great attack with pretty meh speed, and have skills focusing on raw damage. Kel is quick to act, so obviously they are super fast without much HP or attack, just have skills that allow them to hit more things and just generally be a nuisance. Hero's a lot more calm and patient, also older than the others, so he is the slowest, but also has the ability to heal allies, in addition to other support abilities like redirection. He also has the only ability, to my knowledge, to restore character neutral emotions, which is just kind of an interesting concept to me in general, though I never really used it. And then you have OMORI himself. This game is exactly subtle about OMORI's separation from the others, and it goes all the way down to moves you can actually learn. While other characters learn moves like Massage, Headbutt, and Courage, and so forth, OMORI learns Mock, Trick, and Painful Truth. You get the idea. OMORI flat out has Stab as one of the first ability unlocks, and these abilities tend to act very different to the abilities for other characters. Mock is a great example. It's a move that deals damage, but also reduces attack to minimum, but only if the foe is angry. Mock actually lowers the benefit of anger and makes anger more so a pure downside. You get a bunch of moves to this, he flat out lowers the benefit of every emotion, except Happy, which will still have a luck increase, which is honestly interesting to me. I actually really like this, it does a lot without saying too much, and that's perfect to me. Though the balancing is a little off. I only ended up dying about 2 times, which weren't mandatory, and that was about it in the entire game. Both deaths weren't from fights I shouldn't have went to in the first place. I'm not exactly the best strategist, and there's a lot of fights in the game, so this is a kind of a shock. In reality, I also just didn't find it useful of more interesting items and abilities, such as weapon, because the combat in general is fairly simple. There's a lot of options and the way I play can be replaced, but I absolutely had no issues when I played. Because sometimes I flat out didn't understand what dull and moving moves actually meant until I was in the actual final area. I think I used it for a total of like 1 fight. I just thought that was up a crit for a while, when in reality some emotions do extra damage against others and do less damage against others. I'm not sure if this means that more mechanically complex are better and this is a good thing, or if it's a problem because I just didn't understand the combat system fully. I'm willing to go with the latter, but honestly you can make the argument otherwise, and that's probably fair. I think OMORI himself is actually the main problem here. A few of his moves are just obscenely strong, and majority of enemies have a speed stat that mean that they will go after Kel and OMORI before Aubrey and Hero. Unfortunately, Kel has the ability to give any enemy the anger status extremely cheaply. Muck is a move that will then lower the attack of enemies. The stat changes from Muck aren't actually exclusive to when the enemy's angry too, and so you can actually just change the emotion, which can really screw them up as now they've got lower damage on an emotion that probably has less damage already. This especially is more problem with something like Happy, which actually just makes them more likely to miss as well, so you can get some extreme survivability there. You can even then stack another move on top of them, such as Trick, which will actually lower the speed of the enemy as well. And then you can swap to another emotion, get Painful Truth off, and then the enemy is currently just screwed. I should note this is less bad because you only have up to 4 skills available at a time on each character, but that's still more than enough to do this, and it's a bit of a concern. Happy in general is also just kinda weak compared to Sananga. Both Sananga actively contribute greatly to how fight will go. Meanwhile, Happy doesn't really do nearly as much. If an enemy is sad or angry, you tend to really need to pay attention, as increasing damage or defense is actually important. Happy enemies can sometimes be a nuisance, but in reality they gain a pretty minor buff, especially in some key fights. I end up just leaving enemies unhappy half the time when a fight's got somewhat hard. I guess I'd suggest Happy doing something to help recover juice or something? Maybe a small rate of like 5% total juice every turn while an ally is happy? I don't know, just a thought. Oh, also the bosses are generally fun, but a lot of them have way too much HP and become endurance tests. Another reason why Happy is so weak. I wish I had more unique abilities in the latter half especially, in exchange for the high HP pools, becoming a more rapid paced fight where the player has to think more carefully. They are regardless very varied, and most have to be encountered for to some degree in a fight itself, which is nice. Though, again, most of them just come down to outlive the enemy. Anyways, the game isn't really trying to be super hard, and I'm honestly fine with the combat system where you can do moves fairly quickly without too much concern, and to help keep the pace of the game going. And also just some notes I made while fighting a select few bosses where the fight can last like 10 minutes. It can drag sometimes and does become pretty simple and repetitive. I should also note that I am aware there's a good few secret bosses. I presume these are a bit harder than I have to fight, and have more ways to screw your strat up, so you need to adjust. However, you flat out don't even need to visit every area on a map already, so I have no damn clue where half this stuff is, and I didn't see any of them on my first playthrough, I think. Another note about comment I'll make hero items. The economy in this game meant, at least me when I played, that I usually had like infinite healing items and was never out, and this might contribute to the problems with fights ending just really long. Even from early game, OMORI's Bread Slice, and ironically we're probably one of the more mucked up moves if you think about it, you get a large amount of healing items, and early on there's really no reason to not use it. This mostly mucks with hero to me, as I feel they become more of a dedicated, okay, time to spam healing button. I actually never used any support of hero beyond healing on my first playthrough. It just became easy to just do that, and when he runs out of juice to heal, just start spamming items that recover a crap ton of juice, preferably to everybody so they can keep nuking again. Because of the nature of a high amount of items, preserving juice never felt too important to anyone, so I feel the need to bring this up. Oh, and final note, there's a kinda secret 4th condition for Raid. I bring it up here because it's only really used once in the game here, though it does have an ability, disabling certain actions that cost juice. I'd actually have loved this emotion to have played a more major role in normal combat, or for at least one boss to always have characters default to Afraid, or have ways to kick characters into it. Again, probably Secret Boss has this, but a normal playthrough would have made at least one fight a lot harder to default strat go out of, and I think it would have been a very interesting fight. Wait, I forgot follow-up attacks. Follow-up attacks use a resource called Energy. It's down here. You start with 3 and generate it by taking damage. Each attack that hits one of your party generates 1 energy. You cap it out 10. Each follow-up attack uses 3 energy, and involves your party members to work together to follow their attack with another character's vector ability. In most cases, Hero heals the party, Aubrey can gain emotions and buffs, while Kel can deal a ton of damage. Or hit OMORI with a ball. OMORI in general acts differently when attacks use the follow-up. Attacks often not working or just being a lot less effective most of the time. In addition, his 3 options include 2 options where he follows up himself, by attacking again, and the ultimate flashy attack that seems more so put on OMORI as there's nobody else to be on. Really only use the ultimate flashy attack during bosses, and even there it's honestly not too powerful. At least from my perspective there, it really wasn't doing all too much more damage on my average turn in the late game. Like, I was doing about, like if the attack itself in the late game does like 1k damage, I think like most turns I was doing 1.4k and 1.5k a turn. Even through like really high defense in a few cases, it was mad. It's a fun extra system that expands the, to use a Dungeons & Dragons term, action economy, and also allows a player to react in a lot of cases and strategize further. System I enjoy, though it's not exactly the most complex system. That's actually why I forgot it, by the way. The motion system is just more interesting to me in general, and that's the main system the game is actually built around, so yeah. Extra options are extra options, and do that job well. Moving on. Despite my complaints, I did still really enjoy the combat. In reality, my problems really just come down to too many fights being fairly simple, and wanting enemies to more actively screw up players' plans instead of acting as fastly as they did. When things went wrong, which, despite words, happened more than once, mostly because Kel dies from one hit 9 out of a damn time, why are you made out of glass? It was generally fun to try to find a workaround. And overall, a lot of the fights in the game were highlights. This may be down to music though. We'll get to the music. Anyways, let's talk about the most striking thing that you can probably tell without me talking about it. The art style and general aesthetic. It's safe to say the game is well known for this, mostly because it's a super appealing game to just look at, and stands out a lot where the art style can shine. The majority of the game looks drawn by a child, in the sense that things are scribbled in and inconsistent, moving about as lines are misdrawn. It creates an idle animation for every creature and character, without them doing the whole weird, I'm standing here doing nothing kind of thing, if you know what I mean. It just kinda works nicely. The game also occasionally inserts stock photos. By occasionally I mean constantly? It just adds charm overall. It looks so scrapped together, and honestly I just love the style. It just works with the general aesthetic areas too. It's a shame that the pixel art for like the world and things aren't really like this, but whatever. By general aesthetic I mean just bits and bobs, and the general aesthetic is nice looking too. I also can't really imagine how on earth you'd get something to look good in that kind of pixel art style while looking scribbled in, so honestly I'm not going to complain about it. And I also think having the normal art style on the world map would look really damn stupid, so I'm just going to look at the first area of this. Vast Forest. Vast Forest is beyond the forest, an area with a ton of giant pinwheels which just spin constantly. These have no purpose or anything, they just exist to be unique, weird and pretty. Beneath them often are watermelons. Contrary to popular belief, watermelons are not there to be weird. They are convenient spaces to store various goods, and are everywhere. I'll be entirely honest to get used to this fact surprisingly quickly. Like, I almost got to mention this was a thing at all. You probably know this in like prior footage, but there's a lot of footage where I showed like getting things from watermelons and just casually getting used to it. Don't worry about it. The area as a whole is also just kind of charming too. It's like very chill, foresty, and it's kind of just nice. The area itself is also just generally pretty and fun to navigate, with enemy designs even in this area being weird and things preparing to be even weirder as the game goes on, which I quite like. It works in the game's favour. I should also note now that random encounters in this game don't exist. Enemies simply spawn on the world map, and if you run into them, and they'll try to chase you, you get into a fight. I realise I should probably explain that now. It's a nice, decent enough system, I don't have much complaints about it, but it puts a lot of effort on the world map design, and honestly, it's alright. I don't really mind it too much. It's good enough. I could also mention the fact that OMORI is a different cult to everybody else, but, like, you already noticed, it's the single most noticeable thing on the screen in the vast majority of footage. So I'm just gonna talk about the White Room. From my understanding of absolutely nothing, the White Room is probably the most iconic area in the entire game. This time I agree with, actually. It's the best area in the entire game, and it is literally just one room. One room with 4 items. A pitch black light bulb. A laptop. A sketchbook with horrifying drawings, and a tissue box. This room's iconic for a good reason. It says a lot without telling a player anything. It shows a great view into the main character, and I adore it. It's off-putting in a way that just works wonders. Using OMORI is also super iconic. It's a weapon it uses to an extent. A lot of emotional moments are created through the use of song, noises, or whatever else you want to call it. A lot of songs have this undertone which make them feel just off, but still faintly familiar. And the battle music is loud and bashful, working towards a feeling of threat very often, which I adore. I will only be using this game's soundtrack in this video, and I'll try to incorporate variety as I go, which is honestly easy to do as the soundtrack is incredibly varied. Music that does really just about anything, you'll fit pretty much any mood it really goes for. Because of the nature of the game, that's saying a lot. Also, because I'm bored, I end up sawing music in OMORI by most popular on the dev's channel. They actually upload all the songs here, which is very convenient for me. The most popular song is a bad ending song. OMORI in a nutshell. The second most is the song that plays during his boss fight. So sounds remixed already, so honestly sure, why not? The third most is this song. The last song you'd expect to be most popular in the soundtrack. Unless you play the game, so you know why this song is, but you know, by itself, this is just a weird song to be popular in general. It's a very strong variety, honestly, and probably says a lot about the game that these songs have the most views. And I also just want to bring out how important the music is. Visual uploads have 100,000 views at minimum, and a maximum have 2.6 million. For context, the game's original trailer, released 7 years ago, has 5.5 million views. It is tied with the full game's release trailer in views. In other words, the music has a life outside the game, and I imagine people may have played the game because of some of the music, which may seem weird, but these views are way too damn high for that to be ignored. That's ignoring the fan extensions, which have tons of views themselves. It's a very popular OST, and I can't exactly say that it's for no reason. Before I basically go past the, okay, this is the point where I'm totally willing to talk about anything in the game, I want to briefly touch on the story. By that I mean that it's, intense. That's the best way to describe it. Things go wrong. Very wrong. Very, very, very wrong. It really doesn't seem it from what I've said so far, but this game gets rough in terms of play emotions, and when the game wants you to feel something, you are going to be yanked along for the damn ride, and it will hurt. There is a reason this game needs no introduction, and as I said before, this game gets talked about a lot. This game is more likely to kill you inside than it is through gameplay, and it's a game that sticks with you for a while, feels like a damn slap in the face half the time. It is a wonderful experience if you're into that. I won't go too far in depth with this because I'm specifically trying to avoid spoilers, but yeah. There's a reason there's so many videos covering this game online, and a good reason, 99%, are about the story. There's a good reason despite my criticisms, this game has got an absurd amount of positive ratings. People love a good story, and this will be one of those. Now's the point where I really need to say, guys, no, play OMORI already. The best thing what I said is a little much, but beyond this point I'll be talking about the rest of the game and some, not all, of the events in the game. And you won't get a whole lot out of this without context, so I just play the game first. If you're happy with that, or you already played the game, we should carry on now. Okay, so let's finish the comedic tone comments, as they're fairly important and I want to get them out of the way. Now, I know enough to understand why this weird tone exists. You do need to build a sense of everything's going to be okay to make emotional moments hit harder. But I think having Pluto, the planet, as a super buff, bodybuilding superhero that, flies about how when he flexes, he feels his best. I think that's just a tad bit far, frankly. Then he has his own boss fight that just looks like this. There's also some quirk, I guess, as well, which causes some weird stuff to be in the game that strikes me as super out of place. In Vast Forests, there's a secret fight that's literally just a tree. A random tree. It doesn't even attack you. It's just literally a tree you run into randomly and go to a fight menu with. Yeah, stuff like this kind of takes me out of the game somewhat, and I really wish it was toned down. There's a few of areas of weird fights. Like, you fight the Earth for no reason. I don't think it's an actual reason given. I think you just can pick a fight with the Earth. You can do it between two places. It just exists, and it bothers me. I don't know. I'm fine with some recurring jokes and characters, but there's currently too much. I think a general feeling of calm might have done the game better than the company it goes with, though admittedly that might just be my own, preference for more calmer stuff. I don't know. As a side note, technically the fact that a random tree is a boss fight is in fact a reference to a plot detail. I say this but unironically. However, you are still, in the moment, fighting a random tree. You can't say to me how fighting a random tree is, in fact, a masterclass of tone by saying it's plot relevant. It's a heckin' tree. I'm sorry to say, but I'm not going to take that claim exactly seriously, and neither did I when I first played. I just stumbled onto it and just kinda got confused for a while on why it even existed. Actually, while I'm on this is a running theme for OMORI. A lot of elements in the dreams or fake stuff have correlations to things you can see outside of it, and resemble elements of memory and some other mental elements. This mostly works when you specifically know what you were looking for, like here with this hanging spider monster we'll get to later, and the way its mouth looks. You won't notice a problem unless you've already beaten the game, and even then you may not immediately notice it, but I refuse to believe it's not intentional. See, this enemy is now significantly more horrific when you learn context for why it looks like this. But without it, it's still a creepy big creepy spider. Now, remove Big Creepy Spider, but keep its design detail, And this is essentially like 99% of Headspace. Great for replayability and such, as going back you see all sorts of things like this. But on the first playthrough, this really doesn't come up much, and to a lot of areas it just feel weird, with some meaning the player isn't fully aware of. In general, I wish they were more clear. Okay, this is wrong and is clearly representing something I don't know yet, parts of the game. Even just signs of more general torment that had specifics that didn't matter in the moment. This is actually why the Humphrey area of Headspace is my favourite, by the way. I honestly wish we got more of this than anything, and I wonder if I'm alone in that. It's incredibly horrific as a concept in general, as in, it could give children nightmare kind of things, which I think just fits OMORI overall a bit better. It just works. It has comedy, but is intertwined with a major sense of dread and threat. It's a place that feels consistently dangerous, and ending Rush for 2 fights back to back is honestly great, being one of the only parts of Headspace where things feel like they go significantly wrong, at least to me. In comparison to places like, say, Sweetheart's Castle, they don't quite work for me. There's some hidden dark undertones in the castle here and there, sure, but the area itself is still filled with constant jokes. You can't exactly take a warning about the red water not being fruit punch seriously when, With Humphrey, the entire place takes place in a real dangerous area to be in the first place. And while there are goofy antics going about, it feels actually dangerous, and has sections where things are literally actually trying to kill you. The place, in general, feels like it wants to kill you. Then it literally tries to kill you. I think a better idea for Castle Sweetheart, for an example what I mean, is have a lot of these gags cut and allow the general area to start off silly and goofy, but slowly become horrifying and terrifying. Have a movie joke be in the dungeon you get sent to that you have to escape from, as a kind of rehabilitation strategy. Sweetheart is a psychopath obsessed with herself, so honestly this is totally in character. But also have on the way out of the dungeon the King Crawler boss, an enemy that caused a Sproutmole massacre outside their village, appear behind a cage. Maybe even having a cutscene showing one of the Sproutmoles being thrown in. Even better, have a grate beneath, and then you have an explanation for the fountains. It limits probably the biggest joke in the area to be at the start, while the rest of the area now has an established threat, and a reason really showing the overall danger, and giving the area a bit of a sharper edge. If you feel it would help fit the themes better, you could then improve the curve of things becoming more and more twisted. I think it'd work better at least. Anyways, now we cut any pretext of this even resembling anything, other than me just talking about the game. From this point onwards, I'll mostly just be explaining plot stuff, my reaction, and stuff I liked a lot. Frankly, this game is mostly plot. Like, the things which make OMORI a great game and talked about are mostly the plot and such, frankly. Like, the main purpose of the dream parts of the game we've talked about is really just have something to do while the actual plot builds and tension starts to rise. So, let's rip off a bandage. Mari is dead. Not only is she dead, she's been dead for 4 years. This has actually created the main game we play. OMORI is a representation of a different character, Sunny, in his own dreams. And in general, Sunny seems to have, well, lost himself. He was a younger brother to Mari, and clearly thought very highly of her. He seemed to be very dependent on Mari for emotional support, and when I was gone, they went to sleep. For 4 years, keeping almost entirely to himself. Thus, create OMORI, both the game and the character. While you spend the majority of the game as OMORI, it's not exclusively OMORI. The rest you spend as Sunny. These parts are probably what gave the game the psychological horror tag, as these have a habit to get, well, bad. That's not to say the dream sections are free from terrors, however. There's this thing, which follows you around. It's not that scary, frankly, it's just there. Probably just represents classic fears. After all, Sunny does have a dead sister at this point, it makes sense for it to be the case. Either way, it has a habit of appearing and will usually cut the music out when it does so. And most dream sessions end in something startling Sunny, and them waking up. Not before OMORI stabs himself though, that's just fun to deal with and watch every single time. Yay. It's ironic that the day/night sessions work as they do. See, most night sessions will have a part where Sunny has to deal with things that tend to look a little something like this. These are mostly monstrous in nature, but mostly access cutscenes to get the player to somewhat understand Sunny. That's not to say these aren't real. It's not technically impossible these are real, but it makes pretty much no sense for them to actually be here, so I'm going to safely assume they are not. They're a consistent part of the storytelling in this game. These kind of, not really fights, but you have to make actions. One of the benefits of being an RPG, I imagine. I should note that while Sunny isn't the protagonist, he still clearly has a personality, and is a character. He also isn't always called Sunny. You can change his name to whatever you want, but it feels like tradition to call him by his actual name, or close as canon or whatever. You know, just like most other games in this kind of thing where you can change a main character's name. Anyways, this is relevant because of how the game tends to show his character to you, through a few distinct methods, the most major being the photo album. The photo album is a key component to this game and its characterization. It's owned by Basil, who we'll get to later. He's not just a MacGuffin for the players to follow in their dreams, and contains a lot of memories of the characters, alongside text. There's a lot of just cute moments in this book, which characterize Sunny and his friend group quite strongly. He seems to be characterized as pretty quiet, kept to himself, a natural dreamer to an extent, and generally young, if that makes any sense. Like, look at these. I love him. He's not shown as useless though. He seems to have at minimum learned a violin, a tool he desperately wished to play alongside his big sister Mary. Just enough reason for why the death of Mary meant so much to him, and in general why his dreams are what they are. Another key piece of iconography in this game are mirrors. They are everywhere. They're also infinitely less important than most things I've covered so far, but I just really like them, so I'm honestly just going to talk about them anyways. Whatever, screw you. Whenever you look in the mirror, you can often see all sorts of terrifying things. You know, things besides Sunny, that just kind of form part of his, essentially, endless nightmare. Interesting, these also appear in a dream world too. To our right, you can always see an empty space. If you look, it's notable and draws your attention. The thing is, the spooky mirrors tend to put things here. It's just slightly intimidating, and I think it's a really subtle thing that is quite smart and well done. Though I imagine I just missed the part this area is used. Honestly, I'm unsure as hex or whatever. It's just neat, and for me at least, it was one of the few things that kept me wary during dreams. Anyways, from the first proper day, you can head out around town and see what the actual world is like with Kel. This is, obviously, a fairly important part of the game, and carries most of the actual narrative. Debatably because Sunny himself can't really do that now, can he? This is where I'll start talking more about characters too. Once you meet how they actually are as opposed to dream versions, they are all quite likable. Even if I don't know how to say anyone's names. Like, I still saying OMORI in like 4 different ways as a joke. That's the matter of fact, I actually don't know what's correct. I think OMORI is correct. I think. Moving on. Aubrey is a super nice character that I really like the characterization of. The first proper day section has a fantastic first scene with Aubrey, who is essentially turned psychopathic and brutish from the characters and your perspective. In reality, it's about a misunderstanding, caused by Aubrey being left alone when her father left around the same time Mary died, seemingly, and Kel just being an idiot. Oh, also, in your first proper interaction with anyone during a day, Sunny stabbed Aubrey. This is one of the best scenes in the game, and I feel the need to emphasize this. This is a thing that happens. This is honestly comically mean towards both a player and Sunny, and I adore it. It's the kind of thing that the player forgets about, as game logic and such makes it seem normal. And just in general, Grey inside Sunny and his utter dissociation with reality. It sets up the rest of the game really well, and immediately kicks the player into thinking differently about the game as a whole. Here's a character I'm going to briefly touch on, but in the game they essentially act like a leader for the main group the game focuses on. They tend to be the main resolving force behind the characters. The first day sections are missing, and things tend to go terribly wrong in his absence. Mostly due to Kel being utterly stupid and just kind of doing whatever, and Sunny's mute, so even if he's aware, he ain't doing crap. He's also generally characterized as pretty caring and charismatic, which constantly is brought up. I don't really have much to say about Kel. He's a younger brother to hero, but he also seems to be very much the least interesting of the core cast. Not necessarily really stupid, just quick to act, but god 99% of the scenes with him are him being an idiot. He does however essentially kick off Sunny actually doing crap again, so he is very damn important to the game. These characters are mostly there to support Sunny and OMORI, which is fine. I do enjoy their presence, and they certainly add something to the dream sequences, if nothing else. I've already said Mary died, but their presence is massive, obviously. They actually never appear for, well, obvious reasons, but they have a massive presence in the dreams of Sunny, to the point that the main character supporting him to get through his trauma is his own mental image of his sister. They seem to generally be considered very caring, though again the only thing that remains is a memory of her through Sunny, which can't exactly be seen as conclusive evidence for really anything. They're probably the most mysterious character due to their early grave, but despite this is super important for the game as a whole. I should also note the others also very clearly care about Mary too. Hero and Mary seem to have been going out together especially, but as Sunny is the main character I figured this was the most important to emphasize. And then there's Basil. Basil is definitely the weirdest character to me, though that's mostly because I haven't looked into the game much beyond what I saw in the first playthrough. What is clear is that they are, or were, best friends of Sunny. They are clearly very important to Sunny too, and vice versa. They spend a lot of time watering flowers and upkeeping them, and used to take photos for the photo album I mentioned before, which contains memories of what the characters used to be, and is clearly important to the group. However, same with Sunny, they seem to be immensely troubled, though unlike Sunny who seems to really internalize their fears and trauma, Basil seems to have gone absolutely mad, arguably having it way worse than Sunny. Partially due to Sunny, but we'll get to that. Basil in general is shrouded in mystery for the first playthrough, though they are certainly the most important character outside of Sunny and a general force in the narrative. Even in Sunny's dreams, these characters are super important. I feel the need to point out that Sunny has been implied to be dreaming for 4 years, and then in these dreams, his friends absolutely made constant and important appearances. So needless to say, these characters mean a lot to Sunny, and there's a point in Headspace, during Humphrey's section of course, where the friend group starts to forget Basil. Even looking at the right of the screen you can see it. Basil's face used to be here. And this part of the game is already the most intense of the Headspace sections, and you have the day sections before and after. I have to imagine this must bother Sunny in some way. Anyways, there was something I said at the beginning I should probably actually address properly, Like, I don't cover this kind of game, well, ever really, and this video is clearly different from my usual stuff. So, what gives? Well, truth be told, the game kinda took on my head for a while. This isn't the first game to do this, nor will it be the last, but it's a game that I really can't stop thinking about. I don't know if it says more about me as a person, or just the game in general. As for me, I suppose as a bit of introspection, I tend to prefer time spent myself to think, and a very impactful part of my life personally. When I get stressed, I tend to close in and mostly keep to myself, generally going to be quiet and focusing on things and thinking through stuff. During a large period of my life, secondary school, or the equivalent to high school if you're American, things got so bad I was almost entirely mute for over 2 years outside of a close group of friends at home. I think staying alone, you can understand a large reason why this game really caught my attention when I finally played it, and took a solid place in my mind. I imagine I think this way because the game itself is written about the past. In context of the story, the characters I'm most of the time talking to are younger versions of the real version. The entire game is showing you glimpses of a past you don't know, and it builds tension well. It also doesn't help I'm autistic, honestly. This isn't really confirmed by the game from what I played, but a lot of characterizations of Sunny feel very familiar to me. It doesn't particularly matter if he's autistic or not, frankly. Just an intense familiarity that I tended to feel a lot while playing. I imagine other people tend to feel similarly. You don't really need to be even remotely similar to a character to feel for them. In general, a lot of people are introverted, and I have to imagine a lot of people playing the game can't really feel alone. It's weird, I don't know if the game felt more personal to me from other people, but it really did feel personal, and it's been stuck in my head ever since. I think this game has kind of become a weird mental obsession. Like, this script was in the early stages of being written before I had even beaten the damn game. It became clear to me early on that there was something here I was going to want to talk about. It's that kind of intense story that just sticks hard in your head. It's a game which invites you to try to figure out what happened and to push forward, despite you knowing things are going to get worse. It's one hell of an experience. I should note that, evidently in at least one case, I've tried to keep the ending sequences out of this so far. As a result, this game is really a fairly cute RPG with some deep themes and a bit of horror. Until you get to the ending. You may notice that when I described this game's characters, I neglected to mention what the ending reveals about a very particularly important event. In reality, the ending totally flips the damn game on its head in both horrific and fantastic fashion. You already know what I'm going to say here, I imagine, unless you haven't played a game. Like, I wrote notes for this part of the game. It's mostly just feck over and over again. Not very useful. The ending for this game is so intense I don't need to see other reviews to know that's an important part of the game that is mentioned a lot. Despite this though, you can't really talk about this game without mentioning how it ends. The ending, I imagine, defined the game to a lot of people, but I also don't think I need to mention it about as much as I could. The version of the script I went deep onto the depth of the ending, but honestly, you already know what the ending is, and if you don't, then in reality me saying this stuff actually doesn't mean a whole lot. I'll say from something I only realized while writing the script covering the ending sequence. Just look closely. You'll see what I mean. This isn't a cutscene. This is just my initial damn reaction. I genuinely saw things about to go to crap, backed off, before then deciding it would be best to go forward. This actually happened a few times throughout the ending sequences, me hanging on certain images, moments, and some other random stuff. Here's the thing, I don't usually do this. Even when streaming, there's moments we doing stuff like this, but in reality I don't usually react in game, more so externally. And I will say I was reacting only too. It's not just in-game actions. I was practically saying I'm in hell the entire time, and there was at least one point where I ended up having to take a deep breath before continuing. There's one moment I want to specifically call out. That mysterious black thingy-majig that follows Sunny and Omori around. There's a scene where the game shows you why it exists and what it is. I said I died twice, right? One of those devils here. The moment I showed it, I died inside. It's a fantastic moment and just adds a ton of meaning to a creature that I generally described as not scary. It's a great example of something Omori as a game does often. Things tend to go further than you'd expect. You think you've got a decent idea what's going to happen, right or wrong, it gets worse. It's especially prevalent during the ending sequences. It's a constant escalation that does its job great, in creating a serious, genuine unease and concern about continuing. I'll also specifically call out the Yumaniki inspired sequence here, or at least that's how I saw it, being aware of the game but never actually having played it. It's a great way to really show the player just how much is going on under the hood for Sunny, and just formed one hell of an experience. There's a mess of hellish imagination across infinite landscapes, and also this Easter egg that I didn't even notice its meaning until I rewatched the footage. It's wonderful. Oh, also Basil dies like 6 or 7 different times in a mix of fascinating and horrific ways. OMORI is the game, alright? As a side note, I later found out that the trailers actually show some of these areas. This honestly upsets me because I feel that knowing this part of the game existed before in any capacity would have made my experience with it so much less completely out of nowhere and horrifying. I can understand why they're shown, but yeah, not for me. I suppose I should bring up as well that I didn't actually watch any trailers before playing the game. I watched the trailers after I played the game, so yeah. A lot of this stuff caught me totally off guard. I will note that I'm not necessarily sure on the last side of the game. See, this fight screwed me up a lot. Unlike the rest of the game, because of gameplay for once ironically, I ended up dying a lot, and excluded these from the rest of the game as it's a weird fight in general. I wasn't sure of how it was actually meant to end for a while. The biggest issue is that one of the moves the players have seemed to be broken to me, or felt broken when playing. The move makes you attack 3 times, but it seems that the attacks don't deal the right damage. Because, weirdly, it seems that the normal attack did so much more damage, especially near the end. I also think that doesn't elaborate that one of the moves you've access to seems to reset your stats. I'm also just super confused on how this fight actually works, and I felt like I should say that here was where I died the most. And while it wasn't enjoyable enough, I did die about 5 times. It's definitely the lowest point in the ending sequence for me, but that's totally fine. It does its job well enough, and the rest of the ending sequence is more than good enough. Oh, also Basil is the main focus for the ending sequences. I said before I don't quite understand Basil, and that is mostly due to these sequences. His characterization, while really strong here, didn't totally make sense to me on my first playthrough. I think it doesn't help that I couldn't see Basil in a lot of these images when I first played. It just confused me when I first started writing the script. There's still holes to my head, but it's mostly fine. I think I've got a decent idea of what was going on. I will say that Basil in general does essentially go mad, and the main reason is Basil's reliance on Sunny, who then proceeded to sleep for 4 years as I said. Seems to really drive Basil crazy, and while Sunny was able to get what happened for a long period of time, Basil never did. Even throughout the game, a lot of cutscenes show a much larger darkness behind Basil, not a whole lot behind Sunny and Omori. It's an interesting case where it really shows just how much damage Sunny has really caused, but it was a fairly hard point to spot for me. I only noticed people playing this video together actually, so by the time I really thought about it, I already felt for Sunny and know why he did what they did. Oh, and before I think I'm going, oh, Sunny is a bad guy. I mean, Sunny literally made Omori, based on what he thought himself, so yeah, if you're going off that, he certainly believes it. But I should note that aside of the game's plot that is shown, Sunny's honestly just kind of really screwed post the game regardless. Like, he's been out of vacation for 4 years while Basil hasn't, and most likely, will still have a ton of spots in his memory as the trauma did cause amnesia. Remember, from the first part of the game we can see that at the start, Sunny didn't know that Mary was even dead. I think in general post the game, while Basil will have a much easier time recovering, Sunny will have a significantly harder time getting back to his feet. So, I think it's important to keep that in mind when you try and discuss the characters here. Speaking of endings, I ended up getting the good ending. I did a brief search and discovered that there are good, bad, and apparently 3 different sub-endings for a more neutral game. I'm unsure of any criteria, nor do I even know if it's accurate in the slightest, but I won't be looking into the other endings at all. I got what I wanted, so I'm happy just to keep it there. As an aside, I also hope that the good ending was obvious to get. I'll be honest, I think a game like this ending with a bad ending is honestly just not a good idea. Bad endings are cool, show the hero's failing, but like, I think that a game's so focused on emotion about the kind of topic like this, but I really think ending a game like this on a bad note is way more damaging than it otherwise would be. I'm fine with it as long as it's obvious where the player made the error. I presume the final error going up and down decides this, but even then I think it's probably better just a move decision to ensure the player just always goes for the good ending, but I'll be frank, I'm unsure of the specifics at all. There's actually something that bothers me with endings in games in general, frankly. Multiple endings don't necessarily mean a more complicated game, as just for time this will just be more artificial runtime, which I think is something that's not necessarily important. Player choice should be important, but that doesn't mean the game should always be split into different routes. Frankly, players already have choices in most games to change the outcome, through equipment, strategy, etc. That's not to say a game shouldn't vary based on player choice, however, but it takes time to develop different options and make them all feel reasonable. And to an extent, allowing players to make bad choices means that some players will pick them thinking they are correct, only to be punished later down the road for a decision they thought was right, which in some cases may be a bad move. Now, some games fundamentally need these choices to matter, you can probably succeed play and so forth, but it's not necessarily a global thing. I guess I'm trying to say I'm not necessarily a fan of multiple endings being thrown in everything. Does OMORI need them? I don't know. I've only seen the good ending, with only one other ending actually accessible. A pretty good idea what happens in the bad ending though. Mostly because I stumbled on Yossi video and after the previous going through the comments section, everybody was freaking out. I distinctly remember a bucket being involved. I will not question whether it is an actual part of the ending, but imagine the ending is entirely focused on suddenly finding a bucket and washing a bit of something, because that's funnier. Joking aside, based on the theming of the game, I think I can take a safe guess as to where that ending would have went. I mean, it's a game about mental health with a disclaimer about suicide, so it's not that much of a surprise. As long as the player can't just, like, enter a room after missing something important and then bam, bad ending, then it's probably fine. Maybe. Regardless, this ending sequence as a whole is fantastic. I don't think I need to go over why further. There's a pretty big reason why it's so significant to the game. The big reason of why the game just works for people in general. This game's ending doesn't exactly tie everything up. There's this one line from Brazil which says Sunny somehow black in the photos, a key story event as mentioned briefly by OMORI, which doesn't seem to make much sense to me on when it could have happened. At least my first playthrough. Actually, Brazil in general to my first playthrough was super weird and generally implausible. But there's things like a throwaway line about Sunny having a crush on OMORI, reading things in terms of gameplay like secret bosses and a seeming array of creepy crap that can just randomly happen. There's something that, as a wider audience, you can spawn pick at for ages. But I've said before, I didn't watch any other reviews of this game, and under similar notes, I haven't read any theories either, nor have I looked out of any real content outside the game, bar OSTs, to write to, and I would be doing this in game if I could. OMORI is a personal game. It means a lot to people who play it, and there's so much more I could see, learn and understand about this game. But I've been through this before, and I know how it ends. I said before, this game was stuck in my head a lot. What I didn't say is that my brain works in loops. You talk to me enough in a conversation, and the topics tend to repeat. This isn't just how I speak either, it's how my thoughts work and how my brain works. Just a while back I ended up having a profound discussion with myself on pairs, and how they could work as great iconography for a game at some point, for an example of just the kind of weirdness that tends to be in this group. My brain gets notched on groups of topics, and I constantly think about them, and they can truly be anything. But I've said before, the game was well and truly stuck while I was playing, and ever since nothing has really changed. It's in the loop. Now a big part of this is obviously making a video like this, but frankly it's nice to just go through topics and think, and I believe personally I need to talk about this game so I can get the same shot of it. But this also means I have to take some restraint. Back when I was younger, I had a similar phase of Undertale. And, well, remember when I said I spent 2 years mostly mute? Something just so happens to correlate with that. Now I think I made my peace with that game eventually, but it took me a very long time. To this day, my profile picture is a character from that game for a reason. Usually I'd have a Prilla hat, because it's funny. I also have an egg version. It's a game that's important to me, but looking back, it took me in too far. But I did eventually have peace with it and moved on. Eventually, however. And unlike Undertale, I'm not sure how far this rabbit hole for OMORI would reach. OMORI is a game about trauma. A poor kid lost on his own, recurring nightmares due to some truly horrific events. There's a lot to pick at, and frankly, I'm unsure if I will like what I will see. As is, I've listed things that are so inclusive that they may lead to even darker truths. Truths I don't think I want to see or at least think too deeply on. As is, you can make a really solid case that a good chunk of the ending of the game is way sadder than it was intended to be, because you have to remember that everything going on here is in the mind of OMORI and Sunny. I got the names mixed up there. It's a bit horrific, when you think about it that way. My curiosity, while totally natural, sometimes should be held back. It's quick and easy to become obsessed, and I think I should be taking steps to try and negate that. I know there's some things I'd find truly fascinating. I enjoy my time in the moment, but it's merely a door, not the only door, and I think moving on is a better option. That's not a criticize people who do this. I did too once upon a time. But, well, gaze too long into the abyss and it gazes back. And I played this game enough to know that there is an abyss. You enter it, you see it. It's permanent, and even within the game's themes, seems to have drove at least one character mad. Interesting threat, to me at least, and something that I, at least, really should leave it well alone. That's not to say I won't play the game, though. I'll probably give it a replay in a month or two time. There's a lot of stuff I miss, and because of the way the ending works, it's a game where the story to an extent is replayable, at least once. I probably will avoid making a video on it specifically, but you know, it's neat. Like, the version of the game I'm playing is extra content added in, since I didn't see at all that are already part of the base game. There's a lot of stuff to do, and honestly, I think personally I'm curious in my opinion on the combat changes after some more experimentation with it, for example. Again, I did actually enjoy the combat. Maybe seeing some more ways it could be mucked will make me enjoy it more. Honestly, I wonder how many people forgot this game was RPG at this point in the video. Now the real question is whether even writing the script in general shows an almost obsessive amount of respect, admiration, or whatever for the game at all in the first place. And I'm honestly unsure. The script is already far longer than anything I've ever made before. I'm also more inclined to say this isn't something that came from OMORI itself. In actuality, a lot of this is more so a discussion of wider topics. In reality, the parts I keep tweaking, keep returning to when I write this, are the stories of things I've elaborated on more thinking about the script itself. Frankly, a lot of these musings have little to do with OMORI as a game. The vast majority of the script, I imagine, is down to personal taste and preference. It's more so this game giving me thought and really just existing than anything. For these reasons, it's me thinking about the game after all. My personal musings on a lot of elements it incorporates, from perspective are pretty clear, this is my first time playing and this is my thoughts. And then just talk quite ridiculous to the game in some cases. Of course I spend time going over details in this game, but I kinda have to by default of making a video like this. Though I do think that doing so is important anyways. OMORI is a game that wants you to think, at least to me. It keeps so much hidden in plain sight. Seemingly unimportant things become super important when you least expect them to be. These has caused me to think a lot more internally than I perhaps otherwise would have. I think I can say that I'm not the only one either. I'm going to apologise for calling OMORI a weird game. It's an easy way to describe it, but fairly inaccurate. It works on its own rules, sure, but these rules are learnable and manageable. It's strange, but it's logical, and it does come together. To call OMORI weird, to me, means that it's illogical, utterly bizarre, alien almost, which I don't think it is. But more so, calling it weird assumes that the game itself has a rare group of people enjoying it, and as messages are rarely applied. Unfortunately, I can take a look at popularity and conclude that this isn't the case. I guess it's just a critique on society than anything, but I think games like this, working as well as they do, really show a failure of people in general. Mental health is about as important as physical health. And this has been well documented before OMORI. There's merely an outlet for numbers and context. That isn't to say everybody who enjoyed the game has depression or mental issues. I think that's incredibly stupid to believe, but it's clear how much of a relevant thing it is nowadays. As a result, I think the fact that the game has such a following shows too much. And the fact the game generally ended up being pushed away a lot because of a fandom that people despise, or despise at least in many circles I've seen, really scares me, more than OMORI as a game ever could. Because that says something about the game's effect when people stuck with it, rather than moving on, but also just who stuck with it. This isn't the truth of the game, not at all. Most of the society was created and a wider issue with the modern landscape. It's easy to get caught up in worlds and games, to want to see continuation, eternality, and just keep reality forever, which a fan base of artists, writers, and such can actually provide. Social media can connect, and various analysis can provide something to think about in more official terms. I'm just gonna go on a limb here and say that social media is a big part of this. Social media is algorithmic. It has a habit of showing you more of what you already believe and want, and so many people fall into this loop. It's endless. Tapping, swiping, and watching infinitely. Unfortunately, addiction is so dangerous to so many people, and it doesn't matter by what. And I think people may not fully know this. Addiction isn't just a term people slap sarcastically in games. The game addiction, whether or not medically recognized, is a real problem. It's something many of us will have to deal with, and something you may not realize. But a part of this, think about games extensively even when you aren't playing. A game meant to showcase the struggles of mental illness, becoming an obsession to people who may agree that they have these issues, but simply have no ability to realize and see the why behind it. After all, addiction in any form is correspondent to mental health issues, which include elements that OMORI is built around. Of course, not everyone who partakes in a community is addicted. Not everyone who drinks alcohol is an alcoholic, after all. You shouldn't feel guilty or wrong for spoiling a game you enjoy, talking about with a friend, or anything of the sort. By the same token, no developer should feel guilty for making a game people like enough to actually talk about. That's equally dumb. They aren't the problem either, and I have no hatred towards anyone who makes games because of that reason. That would be really stupid. Yet, I can't stop thinking about it. Fanbases in general seem to create an obsession with the game. An obsession, in many regards, seems so similar to an addiction, and I feel that it's going to, at some point, lead someone down that path. I say that like it's a new thing and hasn't already happened. People stuck, imagining a world seemingly more complex than our own due to the nature of fiction. I have to wonder just how many people are out there stuck in their own headspaces, thinking about other worlds instead of our own, not just OMORI's, but others. People that are trapped in their heads without realizing it, focusing waking hours of thoughts on screens, fictions, and all the facets of escapism, as opposed to life in general. I think I see why this game is tagged as psychological horror so often.